Yeah, Jonas Lüscher is a writer of novels. He's a philosopher, and I think that his novels I read, I mean, two of those are quite known. Spring of Barbarians and Kraft, which is the name of the protagonist of the second one, Silicon Valley guy. And I like to read them a lot. As I said, they are allegorical, but also very realistic and very full of thoughts and life novels. Quite successful, I have to say, in Switzerland, Germany, and in the whole German-speaking world. So everybody loves to read also his essays. He just wrote a new one I read about the Ukrainian war and how we should react, especially as Swiss people. We are known to be neutral, as you might know. So what does this mean when Europe goes back to a war? And I think these ethical questions are in the middle of his work.
I read from the beginning, so I don't have to make any introduction. Das Ramsfeld-Porträt hängt direkt in Krafts Blickachse. Wenn er wieder nicht weiter weiß und sein Blick über den Rand seines Notebooks hinweg in der Leere schwimmt, erscheint es als verwaschener Fleck in Rot, Blau und Grau vor der eichengetäfelten Wand. Es dauert immer nur wenige Atemzüge, bis sich die kalten Augen des Verteidigungsministers hinter der randlosen Brille ihr Recht verschaffen und eine Art Leitstrahl aussenden, sich Krafts Bewusstsein bemächtigen, ihn unwillkürlich zum Fokussieren zwingen, sodass sich die Farbflecken in einer einzigen, schnellen, fließenden Bewegung zu einem konkreten Bild verdichten, die tiefen Nasolabialfalten hervortreten, der lippenlose Mundstrich, die etwas kurz geratene Nase, die so gar nicht zu der scharfen Ausdrucksweise, für die der alte und ausgediente Falke berüchtigt war, zu passen scheint. Das akkurat gekämmte silberne Haar, der straffe Krawattenknoten, der den Hühnerhals fest umklammert hält und unter Zuhilfenahme des gestärkten Hemdkragens die selbstsichere, spöttische Visage daran hindert, dem nadelgestreiften Tuch zu entkommen, um auf den Adlerschwingen, die sich aus den Falten einer himmelblauen Fahne hinter dem rechten Ohr des berüchtigten Aphoristikers ausbreiten, in höhere Gefilde zu entschwinden. Warte nur, denkt sich Kraft am 7. Tag, an dem er tatenlos unter solcher Beobachtung stehend sich wieder einmal durch diese Aufmerksamkeit verlangenden Augen aus seinen leeren Gedanken gerissen sieht. Dir zum Trotz werde ich nach einem europäischen Ton suchen. Dies ist es, was ich zu tun gedenke. Einen europäischen Ton, in dem sich Leibniz' Optimismus und Kants Strenge mit Voltaires verächtlichem Schnauben und Rabelais' unbändigem Lachen verbinden und sich in hölderlinschen Höhen mit Solars Gespür für das menschliche Leiden vereinigen wird und Manns Ironie. Nein, Mann würde außen vor lassen, diesen halben Kalifornier. Erst hatte er einen Scherz geglaubt, als er vor 6 Monaten Ivans Mail aus Stanford mit dem Begriff Theodizee geöffnet hatte. Aber Ivan beliebte nicht zu scherzen, noch nie. Auch damals schon nicht, als sie sich 81 in Berlin kennengelernt hatten. Und die regelmäßige Korrespondenz, die sie in den letzten Jahrzehnten ausgetauscht hatten, zeigte in ihrer schnörkellosen Sachlichkeit, dass weder die verstrichene Zeit noch die kalifornische Sonne daran etwas zu ändern vermocht hatte. Dear Dick lautete die englische Anrede, an die sich Richard Kraft längst gewöhnt hatte, so wie er sich an das Ivan gewöhnt hatte, mit dem Istvan Banzel irgendwann, etwa zur gleichen Zeit, als kurze E-Mails die mit der Maschine getippten Briefe auf dünnem blauem Luftpostpapier abgelöst hatten, seine Nachrichten zu unterzeichnen begann. Und dann fuhr er fort: Deine Teilnahme ist sehr erwünscht, sämtliche Kosten übernehmen wir, give my regards to Heike and the Twins, best Ivan. Im Anhang fand Kraft die aufwendig gestaltete Ausschreibung einer Preisfrage, die man zum Anlass des 307. Jahrestages des Leibnizschen Essays zur Theodizee über die Güte Gottes, die Freiheit der Menschen und den Ursprung des Übels zu stellen gedachte. Und in Anlehnung an die Preisfrage der Berliner Akademie von 1753 gefordert wird die Untersuchung des Popschen Systems, wie in dem Lehrsatz »Alles ist gut« enthalten ist, allerdings um einiges schlanker, aber auch optimistischer folgendermaßen formuliert hatte: Theodicy and Technodicy, Optimism for a Young Millennium. Why whatever is right and why we still can improve it. Der Modus operandi war klar geregelt. Die Beiträge sollten an einem einzigen Nachmittag im Cemex-Auditorium der Stanford University präsentiert werden. Eine schnelle Abfolge von Vorträgen, das Zeitlimit von 18 Minuten durfte nicht überschritten werden, der Einsatz von Präsentationssoftware war ausdrücklich erwünscht das Publikum ausgewählt und Illuster. Die Welt, die Organisatoren schienen sich sicher, dass die Welt interessiert sei, per Livestream zugeschaltet. Dem Verfasser der preiswürdigsten Antwort winkte $1.000.000. Ja, dachte Kraft, damit durfte man sich natürlich der Aufmerksamkeit der Welt gewiss sein. Das Finden eines bestimmten Tones, sei es ein europäischer, wie er Kraft vorschwebte, oder irgendein anderer, gestaltete sich schwierig, denn es ertönte allenthalben und zu beinahe jeder Uhrzeit ein dumpfes Brausen und wütendes Heulen in den Räumen der Hoover Institution on War, Revolution and Peace. Ein Dröhnen und Fauchen, das einem altertümlichen edelstählernen Gehäuse entweicht, welches sich wie ein Jetpack auf dem Rücken einer dicken Mexikanerin sitzt, so dass Kraft sich gelegentlich der Vorstellung hingibt, dass nur ihre Leibesfülle sie am Abheben hindert und dass auch deswegen das Gerät so angestrengt, so hörbar an der Leistungsgrenze arbeitet, mit einem an- und abschwellenden Brüllen im Rhythmus der gierigen Schnauze, die die Frau stoisch über den Spannteppich schiebt. Es scheint immer etwas zu saugen zu geben in der Hoover Institution on War, Revolution and Peace. Würde sich Kraft mit der gestellten Aufgabe leichter tun, so käme ihm vielleicht der Gesichtsausdruck des ehemaligen Verteidigungsministers weniger spöttisch und der Lärm des Staubsaugers weniger laut vor, und es würde ihm gelingen, beides auszublenden. So aber bleibt ihm nichts anderes übrig, als regelmäßig dem suffisanten Falken und der Frau mit dem fauchenden Gerät zu entfliehen und in die Höhe des 14. Stockwerks, des mit Büchern über den Krieg, den Frieden und die Revolution gefüllten Turmes zu fahren, in der Hoffnung, es sei noch zu früh für eine der großen asiatischen Reisegruppen, die ihn in seiner Kontemplation stören und sein Vergnügen an der Aussicht schmälern. Kraft stellt sich in eine der hohen, vergitterten Nischen der offenen Aussichtsetage und blickt an dem ungeschlachten Zierat vorbei, der so gut zur brutalen Gestalt des Turmes passt, welcher von weitem wie aus dem Vollen gearbeitet aussieht, bei näherem Betrachten aber eine seltsam applizierte, sandige Oberflächenstruktur aufweist, die ihm etwas Kulissenhaftes verleiht. Dann überspringt er mit seinen Blicken ungeduldig die weitläufige Ziegellandschaft des Campus zu seinen Füßen, mustert mit der Miene eines Kostverächters einmal das Silicon Valley von unten nach oben. Was kümmert ihn dieses mystische Tal, dieser formlose Siedlungsbrei mit seinen seltsamen Kultstätten, den Geburtsorten dieser oder jener digitalen Lebensform? Das ist nicht seine Religion. Er lässt seinen Blick auf der schemenhaften Skyline der Stadt im Norden ruhen und sucht in seinem Herzen nach einem Gefühl des Bedauerns. Kraft ist nur mit seiner Verachtung allein. Die anderen Besucher des Turmes geraten in der Regel ganz aus dem Häuschen, springen aufgeregt zwischen den Fotografien der Umgebung, die an den Säulen hängen und auf denen die Sehenswürdigkeiten mit Pfeilen und Beschriftungen versehen sind, und den vergitterten Ausblicken hin und her und deuten mit den Fingern auf diesen oder jenen Gebäudekomplex. Den ganzen Aufruhr mit vielstimmigen Ausrufen des Entzückens und aufschweifenden Erklärungen begleitet, in Sprachen, die Kraft fremd sind, bis auf wenige Ausdrücke, die, so kommt es ihm vor, besonders laut und enthusiastisch in das kalifornische Blau gerufen werden, als seien sie Namen von Heiligen und Göttern, die es zu beschwören gilt. Da, scheint einer zu rufen, mit seinem Zeigefinger auf einen Punkt im Norden unweit des Campus deutend. Facebook. Anerkennende Ehrfurchtsbekundungen schallen vielstimmig zurück und die Blicke folgen dem ausgestreckten Finger. Und dort deutet einer in Richtung der Bucht und ruft etwas, von dem Kraft nur Google versteht, das aber mit enthusiastischen Ausrufen und intensivem Schaum begrüßt wird, bis ein junger Mann mit dem Ruf Hewlett Packard die Aufmerksamkeit auf sich zieht und die Gruppe auf die Nordseite des Turmes läuft. Doch ein anderer deutet nach Süden und macht mit gebogener Hand die Geste für hinter dem Berg. Cupertino, sagt er andächtig. Ah, Cupertino, Apple, erklingt die Antwort. Und schwärmerisch wird im Chor der geheiligte Name wiederholt und mit langen Objektiven den Hügel fotografiert, hinter dem sich das angerufene Obst zu verbergen scheint. Danke.
Michel Fehr is you could say also a personage and a known writer in Switzerland. He's of the three we have today, I think the most avant-gardistic. So it's very close to spoken words, often His lectures are shows, are spoken word shows. So it's very rhythmical. It's also a music. And me as a theater maker, I could say he's a bit Christoph Marthaler, even if he's much younger, of Swiss literature. So somebody who plays with language, but there's a very dark and also a poetical and the philosophical side in his work, sometimes close to criminal novels like Simili-Berg, for example, which is, and of course, if you now would be in the Germanistisches Seminar and you would try to understand everything that he writes, and you would understand it is quite complex. So, somewhere between poetry and novel and essay and spoken word.
It is really a very small book, and it works as a libretto. So it's for you just in case you would like to know what is he actually saying, and then you can read after. It's in German, but as well in English, translated by Daniele Pantano. And so I don't know what they are asking in Belgium for a libretto in the opera. So I thought maybe you pay €10, but if you don't have it, you pay less. Or if you need a charity, you can ask me personally, and I can think about it. So I will tell you one first story out of it. Das ist eine Geschichte, wo darum geht, dass eine Katze in eine Wohnung von einem Mann streunet, reinkommt, und der Mann hat Anken und eine Bratpfanne, die gross genug ist. Und die Konsequenz von dem ist die Geschichte. That is Berndeutsch, the indigenous language of the region of Bern, Switzerland, where I'm actually coming from. So that one is called a predator. A cat has strayed into the apartment of a man. He's got butter and a frying pan, which is big enough. He knows nothing of slaughter. He starts working on the cat with a knife that's been in the drawer for ages. I'm sorry. I'm a predator. The blood splattered on the floor is black, of course. Butter can sizzle, the man can wait. He drinks wine with it, which is black, of course. He can see the transformation. He can feel the transformation. The cat becoming flesh. Cat becoming flesh. I'm sorry. I'm a predator. I was born in the West. Salt and pepper are my spices. I'm sorry. I'm a predator. Then another little story is called Red Beetle Bluebird. It's a story about an illusion and the moment when you realize that what you had until now was actually an illusion. A beetle with an utterly red body, sits perfectly on a bird's beak of the same utterly red color. The bird is blue, but its beak is red. And now the beetle's wings are transparent and iridescent. And because the light plays along the iridescence of the beetle's wings, creates a visual effect on the bird's head, the blue head appears to move as if taken by reason. The blue head appears to move as if taken by reason. But it's only a trick of the eye, of course, that immediately vanishes as the beetle starts to spread its wings and rumbles, taking off. The bird kept still for so long, but now it shakes and flutters, rustling its splendid blue feathers, and flies away too. The bird is blue, but his beak is red. The bird is blue, but his beak is red. Now, this is a poem I wrote to accompany a movie. It's called I'm in Trouble. It hasn't rained in a while. I could go to a bar, but it's still too early. I have nothing to do. I would have something to do if only I had a decent idea. I throw a handful of gravel off a bridge. I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. I don't know where to go. 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 It is still too early. It is still too bright. Trucks are driving on the highways. There are still birds in the woods. The radio stations sing. Clocks are working in the stores. I enter a store and spray myself with perfume. Everybody wants to achieve something, and soon or later there will be arguments at home. Sons are no longer small, neither are they grown up. None of them have become great men. For there to be a rainbow, it has to rain again sometime. I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go. For there to be a rainbow, it has to rain again sometime. I don't know where to go. 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 It's gotten late somehow. I ended up in the bar after all. People have become complacent. You rarely encounter folks these days. I'm in serious trouble. Out of pity, a woman buys me a drink. I don't drink scotch. Fires are burning. Fires are burning. Fires are burning. I don't drink scotch. Fires are burning. Fires burning. For there to be a rainbow, it does rain again sometimes. Fire, burning, fire, burning. The fires are burning. Fires are burning. Fire, burning. Fire, burning. The fires are burning, burning, the fires are burning, the burning, fires are burning, fires are burning, burning, fire, burning, fire, burning, fires are burning, yes, fires are burning, burning, fire, burning, fire, burning, fires are burning. I'm in trouble, fires are burning. I'm in trouble. Thank you.
So Zora del Buono is one of our most epic writers, quite of Baroque. So she's it's interesting to have these writers here that are also something else. So like Jonas is a philosopher. She's a trained architect, and so the architecture, for example, of her newest novel is quite complex and quite vast, like a bit. Marquez style, so it's a whole century of ideology of violence. It's the story of her grandmother. I have to confess that I didn't read it yet, so this information I have from internet, so I would give much more details, but I will do it immediately after this interview. I will read it because it's, for me, of course, mixing biography and big history with a big age together. For me, it's the main task of art, perhaps, that interests me. And this Die Marschallin, that's the name, or I don't know the Flemish name of or the Dutch name of the novel, but it's also a bestseller. So, and I think it's great to write for the people, but at the same time to have a very complex approach to what a book can do.
I don't read the prologue. The prologue is a sort of Unkenrufe. I don't know the word in English. Unkenrufe. That it's getting very complicated. So I start with the first chapter. It's in Slovenia, in Bovec, in May 1919. Bovec, Mai 1919. Wann hatte sie angefangen, ihre Mutter zu hassen? An dem Tag, als die Mutter sie verließ? Als der Vater sie frühmorgens anherrschte, sie solle sämtliche Schuhe, die nicht der Mutter gehörten, in die Stube bringen, ihre eigenen, die von den Brüdern und auch seine, und zwar zackig, um dann mit ausgreifenden rhythmischen Bewegungen die glatten Sonntagsschuhe, die feinen und die weniger feinen Stiefeletten, die Pantoffeln, die Landarbeitsschuhe und die Fellstiefel mit dem Besen aus dem Hausflur auf die Straße zu fegen und immer weiter zu fegen, auch als längst kein Krümel mehr auf dem Boden zu entdecken war. 12 Damenschuhe lagen zwischen plattgefahrenen Pferdeäpfeln vor ihrer Haustür, damit alle sehen konnte, dass Maria mehr Schuhe besaß als jede andere Frau im Dorf, was sowieso jeder wusste. Damit alle sehen konnten, was Maria aufgegeben hatte. 12 weggefegte Schuhe bedeuteten aber auch, Mutter war mit kleinem Gepäck gegangen. Oder begann der Hass an dem Tag, als die Mutter zu ihnen zurückkehrte, mit dem Kind eines Fremden im Bauch. Gedemütigt zwar, aber mit jener Aura der Verwegenheit, die sie fortan umgeben sollte, vom Sitz des Fuhrwagens steigend, der sie nach Hause gebracht hatte, wissend, dass Cesaro sie wieder aufnehmen würde. War es überhaupt Hass? Es war schließlich nicht so, dass Zora ihre Mutter ununterbrochen hasste. Manchmal vergaß sie das brennende Gefühl, dem sie überhaupt einen Namen hatte geben müssen, was erst im Alter von 14 Jahren der Fall gewesen war, als sie die Mutter dabei beobachtete, wie sie einen Blumenstrauß in der Vase drapierte und dabei versonnen die Blütenblätter eines Rittersporns streichelte, mit einem Blick, den Zora nicht deuten konnte, doch der sie verstörte, weil er aus einer anderen Welt zu kommen schien, einer, die Zora verschlossen war. Da dachte sie zum ersten Mal, ich hasse dich. Vorher hatte sie nur diesen Unmut gespürt, ein Unbehagen in der Anwesenheit ihrer Mutter, vor allem ein körperliches, als ob aus diesem urvertrauten Mutterleib ein Fremder geworden wäre, ein mächtiger Frauenkörper, der bei ihr bei unzähligen Gelegenheiten zu nahe kam und den sie nicht wegzustoßen wagte. 5 Monate war Maria weggeblieben. Vom ersten Tag an hatte Cesaro seiner Tochter klargemacht, dass jetzt sie die Frau im Haus sei, was das 8-jährige Mädchen fraglos akzeptierte. Der Vater hatte deutlich gesagt, man wisse nicht, ob die Mutter jemals wieder zurückkehre. Und nein, sie habe ihm nicht erzählt, wohin sie gehe. Nur tot. Das hatte er den 3 Kindern eingebläut. Tot sei sie nicht, das wisse er mit Sicherheit. Tot ist sie nicht, hatten Franz, Zora und Ljubko einander immer wieder zugeraunt, wenn ihre Sehnsucht nach der Mutter zu groß wurde. An diese hoffnungsfrohen, im Laufe der Monate verzagter werdenden Flüstereien erinnerte Zora sich, als sie jetzt auf der Brücke an Ljubko vorbeifuhr, der kein wimmerndes Kind mehr war, das nachts in ihr Bett geschlichen kam, um bei der älteren Schwester Trost zu suchen. Manchmal hatte er nach Honig gerochen. Morgens klebte ihr Haar, weil er seinen Honigmund darin vergraben hatte. Irgendwann hatte sie beim Putzen, die Frau im Haus, einen Honigtopf unter seinem Bett gefunden und gemerkt, dass es im Leben des kleinen Ljubko eine Reihenfolge des Getröstetwerdens gab und sie am Ende der Rettungsleiter stand. Daumen nuckeln, Hasenfell streicheln, Honig naschen, zu Zora kriechen. Groß war er geworden, dachte sie, und stark, wie er da neben der mit Steinbrocken gefüllten Schubkarre stand, lässig eine Zigarette rauchend, ein Jüngling mit kastanienbraunem Haar, bergbachklaren Augen und kräftigem Knochenbau, wie alle in der Familie, oder fast alle. Obwohl sie nur 3 Jahre älter war, verspürte sie eine mütterliche Zuneigung zu ihm, und die hatte nicht zuletzt mit dem Honigtopf zu tun. Betrachtete sie Ljubko, roch sie Honig, noch heute. Sie beschleunigte. Der Blick aus dieser Höhe war herrlich. Wenn sie etwas liebte, dann das, die totale Übersicht. Und dank der Vollgummireifen fuhr sich der neue Lastkraftwagen weitaus besser als der alte mit den Eisenrädern. Auch die Windschutzscheibe war eine feine Erfindung. Weniger Staub im Gesicht, kaum noch tränende Augen. Der Krieg hatte der Lastwagentechnik zahllose Neuerungen beschert. Immerhin das. Zora wusste viel vom Krieg. Jeder im Socha-Tal wusste viel vom Krieg. 3-sprachig sogar. Die schweren Worte gingen den meisten geschmeidig über die Lippen. Zoschke Bitke, Battaglie dell'Isonzo, Isonzo-Schlachten. Zora fiel das Deutsch leichter als den anderen. Die 2 Jahre im Mädchenpensionat in Wien hatten sie nicht nur mit der deutschen Sprache vertraut werden lassen, sondern ihr eine gewisse großstädtische Noblesse eingehaucht, die im Dorf nicht jedem gefiel, oder genauer gesagt, fast keinem. Auch den Dorfnamen gab es in 3 Varianten: Bovetz, Blezzo, Flitsch. Als Kind hatte sie nach Laune mal dieses, mal jenes gesagt, am liebsten aber Flitsch. Flitsch klang lustig, wie Glitsch. Sie und ihre Brüder hatten Reime gesungen, sich den Hang zur grün schillernden, eiskalten Socha hinunterglitschen lassen und einander mit Glitsch beworfen, ihrem Familienwort für Schlamm und überhaupt allem, was eklig war. Schnecken zum Beispiel. Schnecken waren auch Glitsch. Der Fluss hatte sogar 4 Namen. Socha, Isonzo, Lusinch, Sonntag. Zwar sagte kein Mensch mehr Sonntag, nicht einmal die hartgesottensten K&K-Monarchisten. Sonntag war heimlich verloren gegangen. Aber man hatte noch die Wahl zwischen dem slowenischen Socha, dem furlanischen Lusinch und dem italienischen Isonzo. Doch seit die Italiener die Herren im Tal waren. Sie bremste, als sie in die Dorfstraße einbog. Dass Teile der Fracht, die sie auf dem Weg transportierte, gefährlich waren, wusste sie natürlich. Doch irgendjemand musste schließlich den Schrott zur Deponie bringen. All die Munitionshülsen, Patronen, Bajonette, viele davon für das M1895, die Feldspaten, zerbrochenen Keramik-Stielhandgranaten, Stücke von österreichisch-ungarischen Repetiergewehren, manchmal auch ganze italienische Carcano-Gewehre und Stahlhelme natürlich. An vielem klebte Blut. Zwischenzeitlich hatte sie ganz vergessen, was in den Holzkisten lag. Als sie die Passstraße hinuntergerollt war, hatte sie kurz an ihre Mutter gedacht, an das, was sie beide trotz allem verband und wovon sie dachte, dass es der eigentliche Grund war, warum die Mutter damals zurückgekehrt war. Die Liebe zu diesem Flecken Gebirgslandschaft, die ungeheure Weite der Ebene, umrahmt von Bergen, die sich wie kantige Brocken um das Hochplateau lagerten. Darin die smaragdgrüne Socha, eine erhabene Landschaft, vom 10.000-fachen Soldatentod gänzlich ungerührt.
Right, it's a perfect song to end the first part of the evening. The second part is not going to be as long and elaborate, but we do, we're going to still talk to these 3 authors for a bit. And we also asked Milo Rau to always sort of like jumpstart this discussion. We asked him a couple of questions last week. And the first one is actually, what does it mean to be Swiss? And his answer is quite funny, I feel.
I mean, the Swiss passport is, I think, one of the most effective. So I remember when I'm in Iraq and at the roadblock. So if you come from Israel, then okay, you face a week of problems. But already when you come from France or the US, then you face a lot of problems. But when you come from Switzerland, you are always the first one, together with Germany, strangely, who can pass through these roadblocks. It's like saying, when they ask you, what are you? Then you can say, I'm a Swiss artist. And Swiss and artist together, they think, okay, there will be no problem at all. And that's interesting. So this neutrality is really taken seriously in the world. Of course, on the other hand, and my whole own work is about this. And I think also of these writers we invited today, for example, from Jonas, that of course we are also a spot of economical hyper-criminality, and that's where our wealth is based on. That we are this kind of extra-legal space where the raw materials, the gold, the financial market, etc., has its place to land outside the law. And that's why we are so rich. That's not because what we think, we are Protestants and working and Calvinists and working all the time, might be one reason, but the real reason is that we are this spot of outside history almost. Since 500 years, no big war. After the War of 30 Years, Switzerland stopped to have wars. On the other side, and that makes us a bit a parallel nation to Belgium. We are in between the big nations. You could say we are a nation of will, and we are not a real nation in the romantic sense that one language, one people, one story. We are really a connection. And that's why you can read a bit the future of Europe somehow in Switzerland, you know, like as a migration society, as a society of different cultures, as a society of the third sector, as a, the accomplishment of many stories of the of Western culture. So I mean, it's a quite functioning society. On the other side, we have one of the biggest right-wing populist parties and oldest one in Europe after '89 with the SVP. It's our right-wing party. It became the biggest one in Switzerland, and it's still. So it's not going away. So what happens with the Marine Le Pen movement in France, in Hungary, etc., it happened even before in Switzerland, and of course also in Austria, our twin nation. So, and the last thing that in Switzerland for me is touching, that's a bit my Pasolini side of my existence, that when you go outside Zurich or Geneva or Bern or the big cities, you will find immediately, and that's also what Michael Fehr is talking about in his novels, you will find a completely different, archaic, traditional, rural Switzerland, where you have old songs, old ways of working, of living together. And of course, that's also a basis of this whole right-wing thing in Switzerland. But on the other hand, it's impressive how close these things, countryside, big cities, are in Switzerland still.
All right, there's a lot to uncover, I think. Let's start with the passport. Are you as happy with your passport as Milo is?
The Swiss passport has one problem. It's not an EU passport. And that's maybe one thing which is important for me about being Swiss. It's not so much about what it is, what it means to be Swiss. It's, for me, it's also important what it doesn't mean. And I think it's a pity that we are not part of the EU.
Right.
For me, that's one of the reasons. I do live in Germany since many years, and I have the German passport now too, not because of its second most powerful on Iraqi's roadblocks, but because it was important for me to be a EU citizen.
I have to say, like, this is something I noticed. Like, you live in Germany. I believe you also lived in Germany. Michael, you live in the UK right now, or you lived in the UK for a while?
I didn't actually live there, but I was there for quite a while, yeah. And
Okay.
it became sort of a very important experience for me, but I never lost my idea of being Swiss, basically.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, it's not about losing it, but I do feel maybe it's a coincidence, but also like Milo, of course, he also lives abroad. It seems like you guys can't wait to get out of Switzerland.
It's called the fifth Schweiz.
Yeah.
Because we have these 4 languages, and then we have the 5th Switzerland, and it's the foreign. So it's from these 8 million
diaspora.
8 million Swiss people, 1 million lives not in Switzerland.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot.
And in the history of Swiss artists, especially writers, it's quite common to live outside, or at least for parts of your life, like Max Frisch, who always tried to live in the US and lived in Berlin and lived in Rome. And it has to do something with, I mean, it's a really small country, and especially the cities are very small. I mean, I grew up in Bern, like Michael, and Bern, it's the capital, but it has only 130,000 people living there. So it's really a small city, and that might be one of the reasons that, for me, it was a reason. I wanted to live in a bigger city. And
Yeah. Same for you?
For me, it was different with this. I live now in Berlin. I went to Berlin in '87, so it was West Berlin with the wall and everything, and the Wallfeld. And I could, of course, apply for the German citizenship, but I never wanted that, never. Because I'm not German. I am there for 33 years, and I'm definitely not German. And the strange thing with Switzerland was when COVID came and we had the first lockdown, by accident in this 15th of March. I had to go back from Berlin to Switzerland because of my mother, and I drove by car, and I knew then there will be this lockdown, the border will be closed. And when I was across the Swiss border, I thought, okay, we all have to die now, and it's fine that I'm home. And I really was shocked about myself that I thought, you are living in Germany most of the time of your life, but for dying, you want to go home. What is that? But there I felt there is something with Switzerland, or I have to say, and I'm half Italian and half Swiss, but still, it's the language. Perhaps it's the language which is closer when you are ill or sick or dying, that I thought I will be there and not in Germany. I don't know. It's childish or whatever, but it was the feeling I had.
No,
We all still are alive, yeah.
Yes. The zombie apocalypse didn't happen. But let's talk about what Milo also said, like, in terms of like the passport, and he was talking about, well, because like we're Switzerland and we're neutral, and then they don't see us as a troublemaker or as a problem. Yeah. Of course, as like an artist, you don't really want to be seen not as a troublemaker or a problem. Like you want to actually.
And of course, we are not neutral. I mean, this is bullshit that we are neutral. We say we are neutral, but in the back, we are dealing with what he says with all the countries in the world and doing all the bad stuff.
Yeah, but I think one of the differences might be that even when I try to make trouble, it has not really consequences in the way of when you do this in other places in the world, that can end up cruel, and it can end up with you dying. That is not a reality for us, and I think I would put even this passport thing quite simple in these days, because it might sound even a little silly, but one difference is as far as we are now, and as far as I can see now, I can drink water and I go to the hospital. That's the difference. It's not if I can pass roadblocks. This is still in a world where we are traveling and sort of expanding ourselves. But when it comes to the point, I will still, as far as we can see now, I will still drink, I will still eat, I still go to the hospital. Plenty of others might not anymore. That is a difference just of an hyper privilege. Which comes, for me, and this is the difference, responsibility. And therefore, avant-gardism. There is a reason, there is a program why somebody can say about me, why he's avant-gardistic. There is a reason for that. It's our responsibility, because we have the wealth to be experimental. We can take the risk.
No, I have to don't worry. Also in Belgium, you don't get killed if you're avant-gardistic. That only happens in Italy. I'm sorry, I mean, how do you feel about what Milo said about the neutrality? And because I know you're not neutral, and you also mentioned like the hypercriminality. So I guess like everyone kind of also views you a bit as a sort of rogue state at the same time. Yeah, you are viewed like you sold that really well as like a neutral country, and as an artist in Switzerland, don't you feel like the need to rebel against that?
Not especially as an artist, but more like as a somebody who writes political literature, and as somebody like me who is involved in political discussions by writing essays and stuff. And I mean, the whole discussion about neutrality is a completely new one since the last 100 days, since the war in Ukraine started. I think for all the neutral countries, the discussion completely changed. And of course, we have to think about what it can mean to be neutral. And as Zora said, there is a lot of double standards, and right now Switzerland is even not allowing other nations to export weapons they bought in Switzerland to Ukraine. But we don't have any problems to export weapons to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, who are involved in the war in Yemen since many years. So this kind of double standards is something which I don't know if it's typically Swiss, but yeah, in a way I'm afraid it is, kind of. I mean, doing business is like the first priority, which has a lot to do with the SVP, the party Milo mentioned, but also a lot to do with Swiss traditions. And we don't really start the discussions which would be important now. We can avoid these discussions. In other countries, I think, especially in the Nordic countries, where they apply to NATO now, and there is a whole discussion going on, and we still avoid those discussions.
Yeah, the discussion about NATO was not once in the media in the last weeks. It was nothing.
No, I think if you would bring it up, you would be called insane or something like this. It's not even debatable, which doesn't mean that I think Switzerland has to be part of the NATO, but
we buy now these expensive airplanes, these air fighters.
Yeah.
It's our way of NATO.
All right. Well, let's before we continue, let's listen to Milo one more time, because we also asked him, since he's one of those people who has left Switzerland in a way, like he returns quite often, but he doesn't live there anymore full time. If he ever misses it, and what that means to him.
I mean, I have the impression today it's en vogue to say that you are at home where you are, where your work is, where your friends are, where your family is. And of course this is true, but to be honest, for me, the mountains, a certain smell and atmosphere. For example, I come from the eastern part of Switzerland, from St. Gallen. It's in the Voralpen, or in the pre-alpine world, where summer is never hot. In the evening it will always be a bit cold. You always have, in hidden corners of where I live, you have snow the whole year. So it's and I come there and arrive by train, and I have this smell of cow shit, for example, and I'm immediately at home, and it's not myself who is at home ideologically, and then I feel Swiss, but it's really there that I feel, okay, so this is existing here, and that's a kind of a part of my soul belongs to in a material way. So it's not that I meet somebody and I think, wow. But the same thing when I'm since 25 years not living in Switzerland anymore, and when I arrive and then the accent changes, and then the Swiss accent arrives, and then even the Eastern Swiss accent arrives, which is the most absurd accent in Switzerland, and I feel at home. So that's just a fact. At the same time, I mean, yeah, I can feel the same with Ghent. When I come back to Ghent, I feel it with Cologne, I feel it with Paris, where I studied. So because I was last week there, and I immediately felt, but what I'm doing, why I'm not living in Paris, you know? So this is, I couldn't say that I am on an intellectual level, direct democracy, different cultures together, I mean, a very harsh migration politic, but at the other side, a very mixed society, especially in Geneva and in Zurich. So I can relate to this kind of urbanism, and I can also relate, for example, I was hiking with my family, and I came in together also with my mother, and we came to a mountaintop where was a hotel. And then my mother was asking, because her neighbor, she worked there like 50 years ago when she was young. And she asked the guy who was the holder of, and it's in the same family since generations, if he reminds her, and he reminded her. She was working there for one summer 50 years ago. And that's how, you know, how some things stay the same in Switzerland. That made me like, yeah, I know it's super conservative and there is all the negative parts of this kind of having the same hotel with the same family, perhaps for years and years. But I said, okay, that's, yeah, outside history somehow. And then, yeah.
So, well, basically, it's also what you said. Yeah. So.
He would go when he has corona to Switzerland and
Yes.
back.
Well, you left out the cow shit, which I appreciate. But I want to return to, and Milo mentioned it again in this part. So, like, Switzerland is, and he said in the previous bit, like he called it not really a nation of, or he called it a nation of will.
Yeah.
You know, because there's this one language, one people, one story. As is Belgium, of course. I think that there's a big similarity there. But he also said in the other part of the interview that for some reason you seem to make that work in a way, because like in Belgium there's a lot of, you know, there's a big nationalist party. There's a lot of debate about whether or not we should, you know, stick together or not. In Switzerland, which is more complex, you have like 4 national languages, but for some reason that seems to work.
Yeah, because we have because of this direct democracy, which is really different from all other countries in the world, we have to deal with compromise, and we have this word of consens. It's always consens. We have also, if I'm not okay with something we decided, it's okay, we have to deal now with it. So we are used in, also in, when before we have these elections, you have a book, they send you a book with all the things positive and negative, and this one says that and this one says that, and then you have to read all the things, and then you have to talk to your friends what you say. Should we really with Indonesia make a
Trade agreement.
yeah, or not, and now we see it's perhaps not good or good, and so as you have to deal so many things, so complicated things with all in the country and with outside, that we are used to go through all these topics. And I think this brings the people together, or that's how we understand this direct democracy, I think. Or what do you think, the two of you?
I'm not that sure. Maybe it's part of, but on the other hand, I also think that we are really good in Switzerland to avoid fighting and to avoid not agreeing with each other. We wouldn't even debate if there is a problem, and we kind of keep it under the rug. So we are really good, which is maybe also a good thing, to live together with each other, the different languages groups, without bothering too much what the others are doing. So sometimes I think it's more like a question of disinterest. There's, like, if you live in the German part of Switzerland, you know there is this French-speaking part, but it's kind of far away, and
Yeah, but that's the same in Belgium.
it's probably the same, but we wouldn't like to to make a problem out of it. It's a very Swiss thing not to not to fight publicly. And
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of art, is there, because that's also, I think, one of the problems we see in Belgium, like there's, you would have French-speaking authors and Dutch-speaking authors, and like people in the other part of the country wouldn't necessarily know of the others. How is that in Switzerland?
The same.
yeah, it always has
Absolutely the same.
to go over Paris or over Berlin.
Right. So if your book sells really well in France,
in France, in Paris, or in France, then it goes to the French-speaking part, and also with the kind of famous, like Joël Dicker, which is probably right now the most famous French writing Swiss writer. he wasn't known in the German part till he became like a star in Germany and was on the bestseller list on the Spiegel. That's the most important bestseller list. Then Swiss German people realized, oh, okay, there is a Swiss writer we probably should read. It always takes the detour.
Right. Now, in the next bit, which we're not going to show anymore, because otherwise we're going to go over time quite spectacularly. But Milo said that he acknowledges that that is the case. At the same time, he does also say, well, it's getting a bit better. Like, it's not as bad as it used to be 20 years ago. But from talking to you, I don't get that feeling, actually.
No, I think it's exactly this way. When I left Switzerland 30 years ago, it was really a boring and so country, and now I come back, it's a lot of foreigners, much more than there were, so they opened, of course, the society. It changes, and this SVP, this right-wing party, which I don't think it's that right-wing like Marine Le Pen, I think there is a bit different.
In a different way, but
in a different, but or with AfD in Germany, this is more right-wing than SVP is more a rural thing, that we don't
that's
understand.
What they try to believe us, but it's not really true.
But in Zurich, I mean, in the cities, this is perhaps a problem that the city people and the people from the countryside, they don't understand each other really. But this you have in all countries in the world, in the US.
Yes.
And so.
But at the same time, in the next bit, which we're not going to show, but Milo also said he acknowledges the fact that there's the city life and there's rural life. He also did say something really interesting, that like in France, for example, like every big artist, writer, actor, director, theater maker, whatever, doesn't really matter. Like they would live in Paris, because if you don't live in Paris as an artist, like, what are you doing? Like, it's not going to happen for you. Whereas in Switzerland, he said, a lot of artists actually do live in the country, and so, I mean, there's a big difference there. Then I think so. It also means that you might not have like a big scene as you do like in Paris.
I don't know that. I don't know a lot of people who live in the countryside.
But I saw you
Perhaps
nodding. So
you'll know more. I know the people who live in Berlin.
I mean, it's different in Switzerland because we don't have the one very big city. I always compare it to Austria, where you have this huge, like one of the major world cities, Vienna, with almost 2 million people. So it's really a center of the country. But in Switzerland, Zurich has 430,000 people or something like this. It's by far the biggest city, but then the other ones are all small, and it's is it an English word? Federalism?
yes, that is, yeah. That is a word.
It's something we take really serious in Switzerland, really serious, which I actually like, and that helps a lot. I think that countries who are much more federalistic, they tend not to have this centers of gravity in their middle, like France is the best example for having only Paris and everything else is province. And,
But then that also must influence, the arts.
Yeah, because this federalism also has always to do with money, because every city or every village has its own tax system. So you go, if you have a lot of money and don't want to buy taxes, you move to Zug or so. So for the artists there, I mean, it's a different atmosphere when you live with people around you who only live there because they don't want to pay taxes. So, and then in Zurich you pay high taxes because it's an expensive city, and so this is strange. These are strange things in federalism,
Sure.
I mean, this is crazy that every village has its own system for everything.
But on the other hand, almost every village has its own cultural, how you say, Kulturförderung.
And you can choose. I mean, you can choose what you like. So everyone finds his place where he wants to live
All right.
in this little system.
Michael, I saw you nodding when I described how Milo said that, you know, there's not this one center, like there's a lot of rural artists, let's say.
Yeah, also two things come to my mind. One is, I think, keeping all the electronic devices aside, if you want to get to know people, you have to go there, I guess, or then invite them. And so I know French-speaking writers, Italian-speaking writers, even not known ones, but I still consider them as writers because I know them and I know their work. So these are my friends. So this, I think, is the reason why it works. That's simple. It's just me and my friends. And then another person, it means another person's him or herself and him or her friends. That is one thing. This is why it works. Not I go there, I speak, I listen. Hello, so Michael, and so on. And the other thing is, what is for sure a reality is that people from Ticino feel excluded. And what we are doing then as German-speaking majority say, no, you're not excluded. That was it. No? But nothing comes with it, you know. So also, this is a little what Jonas said in a more maybe in a more simple way. These two things come to my mind. One is you have to interact, otherwise there is no answer. Nobody will call you back when you're not calling. And the other thing is, yes, of course. Also, we are not talking about. We have an elaborated system of not facing things. There I would go exactly with Jonas.
Okay. I feel we have still so many things to talk about, but maybe we could do that with each other, and we could end this panel debate or discussion on this note. I have very few practical things to say. There should be a QR code on the big screen over there, or maybe there should not. In any case, van het moment dat jullie die QR-code zo meteen zien op het scherm daar, als jullie die even scannen, dan kunnen jullie voilà naar de playlist nog gaan. Dan zien jullie het hele programmaboekje van vanavond en ook de playlist van Alex kunnen jullie dan nog een hele week thuis beluisteren, of jarenlang zelfs. En ik wil nog, I want to thank my 3 panelists for tonight, Zora, Michael and Jonas. And I want to thank you all for coming, and uiteraard ook Behoud Begeerte en Pro Helvetia die dit hebben georganiseerd. Thank you very much, and if you actually thought this was so interesting and you want to see it again, we're in Ghent tomorrow doing almost the exact same thing. But thank you very much for coming.